Okay, welcome to the intellectual webinar on using SpiraTest to help manage your testing process. The agenda for today's meeting is to go through creating a new project, adding requirements and test cases, building a test plan, defining different releases, running the tests, logging defects. So the end-to-end QA lifecycle. The webinar is going to last about 30 minutes of presentation, and there will be time at the end for questions. So without further ado, I'm going to start by creating a project. So I've logged into SpiraTest with a administration level account. And so when you first log in, you're going to see this link on the main navigation called administration. It's also under the orange S icon as well. When you first go into the administration, you'll be taken to the list of existing projects in the system. And so what you can do now is click on the Add button to create a new project. I'm going to create a very new project for the demo, so webinar project 2. And for today's demonstration, I'm just going to use the default template. That means the project will be created with all the standard fields. It will contain no custom properties and all the standard workflows. If you have a project that you're using as your template, perhaps it has all the standard fields that you need in all your projects, or you've made changes to the workflow and you want those to be on this new project, you could change the option to base it on an existing project and then just choose that project. So I'm going to start by inserting the new project. Once the product is inserted, it's added to the list. I'm just going to select it, which will change it on the navigation bar. And then the other thing I will do is add some people to the project. So I go to project membership, and I want to add some people. So I hit add, and I have 2 people in the system who are not on this project yet, so I can choose them, make one person a manager and one person a tester. And once I've done that, this will be the list of people on this project. So you can customize who has access to it and what role they have. That's the only thing you really have to do to start a new project in the system. You can, of course, customize any of the values. You can change the defect types, statuses, priorities. You can add components. You can also edit custom lists. Those are all possible in the system as well. However, to start off, that's not something you have to do. That's something you can come back to as you start to use the system. So for today's demo, we're going to keep it very simple, and we're going to go straight into the project. So we click on the project name, and that takes us into the project homepage. And initially, it's completely empty, which makes sense. We've got no requirements in this project, no test cases, no defects, no releases. So it's very much an empty project. And we're going to simulate on this demo today, creating a very simple application that we're going to be testing. And so we go, first of all, into the planning section, into the planning requirements. And the first thing we'll do is create some top-level requirements. So we choose the Insert New Requirement. And we're going to pretend that today we're building an airline reservation system. So we'll first define some of our functional requirements that we want to test. One of them might be that we want to log into the system and view trips. Another one might be to enter in search parameters and build an itinerary. And you can use the insert button if you want to insert multiple rows. Just going to hide this navigation bar. There you go. So another one will be to view an existing itinerary and make changes. And lastly, we have a purchase ticket from an itinerary. Someone just joined. If they could, Kiara, if you could just mute your line until you ask questions, just to keep the background noise down, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, great. So we've created our functional requirements. They're right now in a flat list. Typically, we want to have some kind of organization, so we'll indent them all under the parent. And the other thing we might want to do is we might also want to group them further. So let's create a section around purchasing. So I'll add the item up here. And we'll put that one underneath. And we'll create a section for itineraries right here. So we've now got a set of requirements and we've grouped them. Use the right-click context menu in this case. You've got them grouped into a nice tree structure. The other thing we might want to do is have some non-functional requirements we want to test against, maybe some performance, security, that kind of thing. So let's put those in as well. So we'll create some how about performance requirements. And we'll insert two child items using the insert child feature in this case. So as you can see, there's different ways of entering data in the system. You can enter them first and then organize them afterwards, or you can directly organize them as you enter them. So system must load pages in 1 to 2 seconds. Okay, so that's an example of a performance requirement. I can expand and collapse the tree. The other thing I can do is hide and show different columns. I've created all of these requirements, so I don't want you to see the author field. So I'm going to go hide that to make some room. Perfect. You'll notice right now that we have not assigned a priority to these requirements or a release. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply prioritize them, and to do that we're going to select the rows. And we're going to hit the edit button. This top one will do a bulk edit. And let's say they're all priority high, except for maybe the making changes. That's going to be a second phase of functionality. And maybe logging in is very high. So now we've got some prioritized requirements. Okay, the next thing we want to do before we start adding our test cases is going to be to actually figure out what versions we're going to be testing and developing for. So we go into the planning releases section, and for today's demo we're going to keep it fairly simple. We're just going to create 2 releases. We're going to have an initial release, a release 1.0, and a release 2.0. You can have a more sophisticated release structure with child releases. You can have iterations if you're doing agile and you want to track different sprints. It's up to you. And in fact, to do that, it would be very easy. We could just go in here and add some iterations if we wanted to have, say, 2 iterations for release 1. And yet again, I use the indent function to move those under. So if you want to be able to track at the sprint level, you can do that as well. And if I go back to my requirements list, the last thing I want to do before I start building my test plan will be just to associate which of these requirements will actually be in each version, which will help us determine which ones need to be tested first. So actually, I can enter the rows. I can do it this way as well as the bulk edit. And let's say they're all going to be in the first version, except for the modification of an itinerary, which will be the second one. And when I make that change, by default, the system will change them all to the plan status as well. So we've now got our requirements. They've been entered in the system, and they've been assigned to a release, and they've been given a priority. You'll notice at this point that the test coverage is still showing not covered. That means there are no test cases linked to these requirements, so we've no way of being able to test them at this point. If I go into the project homepage, you'll see that also. You'll see in here the requirements coverage shows all my requirements. These are them here, and there's 9 requirements, none of which have got tests. And there are no test cases, and each release will be displayed, and each one will be listed with the number of test cases, which is again going to be 0 for each release at this point. So that makes sense. So now going back into the planning section, we now want to build our test plan, and there's 2 ways of doing this. One way would be to go into the system and just add some test cases directly by going into testing, test cases, and I can add them in here. And if you already have test cases in an Excel sheet or a Word document and you're going to import them, then that would make sense. You would just import them directly into that section, and then you can go link them. However, if this is a new project, which this one is, we don't have any test cases, so a simpler and faster way would be to build a test plan directly from the test cases, so from the requirements. So to do that, I will check the boxes. I'm going to build a test plan for all of these. And I go to Tools, Create Test Cases. And that's going to go through and build a test case for every single one. And it will do a one-to-one mapping between them. So when I hit refresh, you'll now see they all show this gray indication bar, and it will show covering test 1. And if we go into our test case view, you'll see here are our test cases. And in the same way as we did in the requirements section, we can then organize these a bit better. We can create a new folder. Maybe we'll have our functional test cases, which will contain our functional requirements. And maybe we'll put our performance one in its own folder. That's easy enough. We'll indent these. And this one will indent using the right click, so you can do it 2 different ways. And the other thing we'll notice is that these test cases right now, they have a fairly dummy name, which has the name new test case and the name of the requirement. And there's not much detail to them. There's no description, there's no test steps. So one of the things we'll want to do is go into this test case and actually define the test steps that go with it. And these will be the actual manual steps that you would carry out. And this is an area where it depends a little bit on how you want to do testing. If you're doing a UAT type of testing and your users are not as familiar with the application, you may want to make quite detailed prescriptive test cases where every step in the test case is a click on this, click on that, do this, do that. If, on the other hand, you're dealing with users that are fairly sophisticated and know the application, you want to make the test cases, I guess, more reusable, also less brittle, so that if changes occur, you haven't got to rewrite them. In that case, you might want to just have the steps be more of a task-based, like create a user, add someone, because they know the screen, and that way you don't have to tie yourself to specific screen elements that may change. That's a little bit up to you. We would recommend at the very least you go in here, change the title to something that makes sense, like tests logging into the system. And you could also decide to have 2 test cases. This is logging in the system and viewing the tricks. That probably really should be 2 separate tests, so maybe we'll get rid of that and we'll add that afterwards. So this will test logging in. The description can be anything you like, but typically would just be the objectives and the overview of the test. This tests that a user log in successfully. Hit save. And now we go to the steps. So click on the step link. And the first step would be enter the URL into the web browser. Loads. Go into the username and password in the 2 text boxes. Better result, data is accepted. Insert. Click the login button. Better result, the login password is validated and the user is taken to the application homepage. So there we go, hit update. So now we've got a very simple set of steps that defines our test case. Now the other thing we might want to do is make this a parameterized test case. Now this is a useful feature where you want to be able to have other test cases make this a precondition, because when we get to the next test step, which will be to view trips, which we've now decided to make separate, the reality is we really want that to be logging in first, so we can make that a step. However, if we're going to do that, we may log in as one type of user, whereas in another situation as an administrator, maybe we log in as a different user. So one of the things we can do is make this parameterized and accept some input values. So let's say we're going to accept a login, and the default value will be blank, and we'll add a password. Hit add. So now we've got 2 parameters, and you can either hit the copy to clipboard button, which works in some browsers, or just copy the text. And these are the parameter formats we're going to use. And so what I'll do now is modify my test slightly to actually describe what I'm doing, which is to enter the username, login, and the password. We use this format where it's just a $ and a curly bracket, which is similar to what's used in AND. Those are our parameters, and we could also repeat those perhaps here in the sample data as well. Okay, so now we've created a test case with the steps, and we've parameterized it. So as I mentioned, one of the things we want to do now is to actually create a second step to view the trips, because in reality we think that's a different feature. So what I'll do is I can go in here and I will just, if you change to force, give me the save option, I'll do save as new. That's going to save this test case and create a new one directly underneath. And we'll call this one view trips or view current trips. Test that you can see a list of your current trips in your home page. Preconditions, user is logged in. So we can use this to help define the preconditions too. Save. And now we'll add the steps. So the first step we want to do is to actually log in. So rather than repeating the step, we're just going to use the link feature, insert link, and we'll grab that first one. And the login will be red, Defect Logs, password 123, hit add. And we've now linked that in, and we've passed the parameter value, which you can see in the tooltip. And then now that we've logged in, the step would just be to click on view trips link, and then the list of trips is displayed. So now we've got a second step. Now, the other thing we want to do is now, from a requirement standpoint, is the very first test case, test logging into the system. That's already linked to the requirement because we created it from it, but the second one is not. So we go into our requirements coverage tab, and we also want to link this one back because this first requirement was to both log in and view trips. So really, both parts need to be tested. So I hit add. That's great. So now if I go back to my requirements page at refresh, hover the mouse over, you'll see there's actually two tests covering, and they're both listed as gray, so you won't see the difference at this point. Okay, and what we'll do is just going back into test cases. We'll just enter one more test case. I don't want to do the whole lot, but let's just go into this one. Enter in search parameters, and we'll skip the description, but we'll add the steps. So first we're going to log in. Joe Smith. And now we've logged in, we're going to basically enter search parameters and build an itinerary. Okay, so first we'll enter in starting and ending airports and the dates of travel, list of possible flights displayed. And then we'll just do two more steps, which is to select the outgoing flight. Sample data might be page the return flight page displayed. And sample data might be the United flight 234. Select the return flight. The option to save itinerary or purchase is displayed. Okay. Hit update, and that's now another test case. And again, we might want to add the description to it. So tests that you can search and flights and everything. Okay, so now we've got our test cases, and if we go back to testing, we'll see we have them right here. These are the ones that are done. And one of the other things we want to do is also now do our release plan. So for the very first version of the system, which functions do we need to test? So let's go back to our requirements. Everything needs to be done pretty much apart from the making changes to an itinerary. So we're going to get those test cases. and the performance test needs to be there for day 1. And we're going to go to Tools, Add to Release, and we'll choose Release 1, Add. And for Release 2, we have to have all that same functionality, but this one as well. So we'll go Tools, Add to Release 2, Add. So now, if we change our data display, we can actually view the same set of test cases for both Release 1, like that, and Release 2. So we now have 2 separate test plans, one for each release. The other thing we have then is when we start to run the test, we're going to keep the results separate. So when we start to test for Release 1, we'll notice it won't affect Release 2. So if I go back to the project homepage to see where we are, you'll notice that we now have test cases in the test status graph, and it shows 6 test cases not run. It shows 5 tests planned for Release 1 and 6 tests planned for Release 2. And if you hover the mouse over, you can get the detailed tooltip. Because they're all not run, the color indication bar just shows gray. But as we start to run the test, you'll see that change. Also, you'll notice in our requirements coverage, we've gone from not covered, because every single requirement does have now a test case, which is great. We now have 9 not run. Great. So the next thing to do is actually build some test sets and assign them for testing. So if I go to the test sets module, that's where you can build out the different tests cycles that are going to happen, who's going to run them. So for today, I'm just going to create a new folder, which we'll call manual testing. And we'll create a new test set, actually under manual testing. We'll just call it initial test cycle. And that's been planned for today. Actually, yeah, let's say today. I'll assign it to Joe. Actually, I'll wait till we add something to it first. And I hit update. And then I click on it. And I can now actually, on this detail page, give it a time as well. So let's have Joe do it by noon today. And what we'll also do is specify we're going to test Release 1. That's great. And we'll send it to Joe. And the last thing we should do is add some test cases. So I could just go in here and do add tests. But that's the one problem with that is I don't know which ones are in Release 1, which ones are in Release 1.1. So I could do this and just add them. But the other thing I can do is go back to my test case page. And I can display data for Release 1. And I can select these. And the performance test is not really a manual test, so we'll leave that one out. And we'll just do Tools, Add to Test Set, add there, hit Add. And now if we go back to refresh, there we go, ready to go. So now that I've done this, I can actually now begin to do testing. So what I could do is log out and log in again. I'm just going to pretend that I'm Joe and run it directly. But Joe would go to his My page right here, and he would see it under the My Assigned Test Sets and click Execute. We can simulate that by going back to Testing, Test Sets, and just run it from here. And that can be useful when you first build a test set out. You want to make sure that it's correct. You can actually go, try running it by using Tools, Execute. Now the first thing you'll notice is that the release is actually grayed out. It does that because we've selected that at the test set level, and when you run a test case, it will automatically lock out any of the fields that have been preset at the test set by the test manager. If you had left that field unset or any of the custom fields that you may have defined, you as the tester have the option to set those instead. Also, if you're using a build server, you can then view any of the linked builds from, let's say, a Jenkins or TeamCity or Bamboo or TFS, and you can then connect the test results to that build. In today's demo, we haven't set up a build server. So I'm just going to hit Next, and now it's going to walk me through the test cases. So the first one was enter the URL into the browser, and the page would load. We'll pass that one, so pretend we did that. Second step would be enter the username and password. Now this is a test case where we haven't defined a default parameter and it hasn't been linked in, so the values would be empty. So that's the reason why in a real situation you might want to actually give a default value. So that's the case when you're using a test case directly and it's not being linked in, it has a value in it. Otherwise we could just create a separate test case and call it from there. So that's fine. So actually we could actually block this one. So that's, as an example, we've got a test case that really needs to be modified, and so we could actually mark this as needs to have test parameters populated, because I don't know which one to test. I'll hit blocked, and now I'll go to the next one. So the next one is to view the current trips. Now in this case, we've linked it in, so we will see the login and password. So we go into the URL, hit pass, log in with Fred Blogs and password 123. Let's do that, hit pass, step 3, click login button, that passed. Step 4, click on the view trips. That one passed as well. So we've now got a pass test case. Great. The next one, we'll log in with the URL, hit pass, log in, pass, 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 and now we're going to select the outgoing flight. Let's pretend we get a problem with that. So we enter in the select the outgoing flight, and instead of getting the list of return flights, we get we received an array out of range, system error, could not proceed any further. And we can hit the fail button. Before we hit the fail button, what we also want to do is probably capture a screenshot to make our tester's life a bit easier and our developer's life a bit easier. So we'll go in and do a screenshot, and I'm just going to capture the current, I'll just capture our company's homepage, but you would probably capture the actual error message if it was real, paste it in. Description, upload that. There's our screenshot. That's good. And then we'll log a defect. So array out of bounds when being returned flights. That's a bug. It's pretty high. We haven't defined any components, and we haven't made it required, so that's okay. If we want to link an existing defect, we can do that right here. And so I'm going to hit the fail button. And that fails step 5 and failed the test case. And the next one actually isn't really ready yet. So we'll have to leave that. So we hit finish. And there's our testing done. And it's a nice little color pattern we have. If you go into here, you'll see the test case, test set. And you click on it, see that we've got one blocked, one passed, one failed, and one not run. You go to the planning requirements page, you'll see the requirements have got the different statuses. The block one doesn't appear because the first test case is actually run twice. It's run once on its own, runs once as part of something else. So the requirement is shown as passed because we did get to complete that, which is correct. But in the test case view, you will see it's still blocked. In the test set view, you'll still see it blocked. Go to test runs. You can see we have 3 different test runs recorded: the block one, the passed one, and the failed one. Now the most interesting one is actually the failed one, because if I click on that one, that's captured the results. So the first 4 steps passed, the 5th one failed, and then we didn't get any further, and we have a defect logged. So I can view the defect by clicking on View Incidents. That will show me the individual incident linked to that one step. If we had multiple test failures and we kept going, I could view all of the incidents by clicking on the Incidents tab. Also, the attachment is there with the screenshot that I captured. And if I go to the incident, we'll see the same thing. This is the incident, the defect that was logged. It's pre-populated a description with the description of what we tried to do, what should have happened, what actually happened, the steps we took, and it also includes an attachment of the screenshot as well, and a link back to the original requirement, where I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and also a link to the test run. Now, what we typically would do is the project manager, so which will pretend we're now the project manager, we would assign this to a developer, so that's going to be Fred. So we'll click on the Assign Incident section. We'll assign it to Fred Blogs. And we want him to fix it in this release, because this can't go live yet. That's fine. We can even specify the sprint if you want. Hi, Fred. This needs to be fixed ASAP because we start date. You can configure these fields which ones are required. We've set these up to be required, so I'll just put those in. Great. So now we basically assign that to Fred, and Fred is now going to resolve the defect when he logs in, and we would then do a retest. And if we go back to our test cases view, there we go. These are the test cases. If I go back here and I change my release to release 2, you'll notice that they're still not run. So the great thing is that if I test a particular release or iteration, it doesn't affect the other ones. So when we start the next release, eventually when we get to the end of release 1 and we do a retest, this is all going to pass. And so when we do that, this is all going to go green, and we'll be ready to go live. And then when we go back to release 2.0, it will still be listed as not run. So we can now start again. And we may find that during the implementation of some of the new features, we end up breaking something. So some of the things that previously passed will now fail again. So that's normal. And the great thing is when you look at the test history of any test case, even though it says not run right now, when we go to test runs, you'll see that it actually was blocked last time it was executed. And if I go to, let's say, this one here, you see it was failed. And then if you want to filter, you could say, well, only show me the runs from release 2. Hit filter, and right now there's nothing. But obviously in real life you would see that. And now if we go back to the project homepage, we'll see the changes that have happened. We'll see that we now have a test status, 1 failed, 2 passed, 3 not run. We'll see also here the requirements coverage. And the defect open count, which is just 1 defect. So it's a big block of 1. And you'll see also we have a requirement listed with the defect now as well. And if we click on that requirement, this is our original requirement, which is to enter in search parameters. If we go to associations, you'll see we now have 1 defect listed against it. So that way, when you look at a particular feature, you can view all of the defects directly against that. You can also look at the test coverage to see the tests that have passed or failed. And as an example of that, if we go into our very first requirement, which had 2 test cases, you'll see you actually have the 2 separate tests listed, one to view the current trips, one logging into the system. Now, one other thing I'll mention is if we go back to our test set view, one of the things that we had at the beginning was that we didn't specify a parameter value for that first test case. And what we can do is if we go into the test set, we can actually specify that. Test set. We can specify the value there. So if there isn't one specified for another test case linking it in, we can go into this view, and we can go here and do edit parameters. And we can say, so if it's not being called for anything else, we can simply say login with user 1, user 2, password 123, update. And so now we're sending in parameters from the test set. So you can send parameters to a test case, either from a test case that links it into the test step, or you can call it directly from the test set, like this. So now we go back, and we go to execute. We can go and re-execute that one. This one was blocked. This is passed. This is failed. Well, this failure we have to wait for the developer to fix. For this very first one, we want to try it again. You can choose the option from within the test set to check the option, hit execute. And now we'll go through here. Still release 1, and we'll go pass, but we go back. You'll see that we now have a user and password listed. So hit pass, finish, and now we go back to test set. You see the block color is gone. So it's gone from yellow to green. So that's how you would do an example of rerunning something that is blocked. In addition to the home page, which has the high-level reporting, you can also go into the reporting tab. You'll see right now we've got a defect logged right here. Only 1. You'll see the test results we have. These are the test runs, so it'll show you how many have passed, how many blocked. And behind it there's 1 failed, but it's hidden by it because it's the same height. But you can always view a data grid to see exactly what's happened. 1 failed, 2 passed, 1 blocked. And you can export it in an Excel sheet. Also, you might want to get some summary information that's not specific to a particular time period. So how we right now, we can look at, for example, requirement priority against status. Well, they're all planned. That doesn't tell us too much. Or the test case view status by, they're all tested by 1 person, but maybe by, yes, yeah, we'll do. We didn't set the owner. So yeah, it's all just, yeah, I guess we need another field to select against. We don't have one there. Do that, select against itself. If you had a second axis of values, you can then display a grid. And then you also will see things like the defect aging. You can see we have one defect that's 0 to 7 days, and as you get more defects, that will spill across. Plus, you can edit the graphs as well. If you want to add a test set graph, which we don't have right now, which would be useful, I can go add, go to widgets, test set summary, add it to the right side, hit add, close, and then we've got a test set view. So reload the page, and we'll get that populated, and we'll choose. Let's have a look. Owner. By release, for example, so you can see who's assigned to which release, or by status. And you can change the axis. You can also flip them. So if you want to change it from priority to status, you can do that as well, and vice versa. Also, you can run more detailed reports. So one of the most important reports is the requirements traceability, because one of the things I want to see is, do all my requirements have tests? And so I can choose to run that report. Let's say I want to do it in PDF. So I choose the format, PDF. I want to see both forward and reverse traceability. I'm not going to filter anything right now. I want to show all requirements. And I hit create report. And it's now going to run the standard requirements traceability report for all of the requirements in the project. I could limit it by a particular status or date range or release. And I can also save the report for other people to run as well. There you can see all the requirements, all the releases, the test cases, all in a nice table. And I see the reverse view, all the test cases and all the requirements. So I can see if any test case is currently not being used by any requirement, and the reverse. So that's an example of an end-to-end set of tests. Any questions from anyone who's on the webinar? Anything else you would like me to demonstrate?
Nothing I can think of at the moment, actually.
Okay. 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 So what I'll do is, with the time remaining, one thing I can show you is also we have one additional feature, which is is for using Rapise, our automation tool, to do a manual test case. We added it in the last version, and it does tie into this because it's another way of creating a test cases. So if you remember before, I created the test cases by going to testing, test cases, and what I did is I basically went in and let's say I was going to create the test to log into the system, view some trips, and I manually went in here and I typed some test steps, and that can take some time. So one of the things that we added with Rapise, if you use it with SpiraTest, is it can actually create a manual test case for you based on using an application in real life. So as an example of that, let me close a couple of these tabs down. What I'm going to do is pretend to book a flight. Let me think. I'm just going to use our company website just to show the login piece. So let me go to defects.com, and I'm just going to log out. So we're going to record a sample login script. So instead of going in to the test cases view and going here, and as I did, I basically went through it and I entered a URL, a login, and a password. I can actually record that. I'm actually doing it. So I go to Rapise, and we've linked Rapise to SpiraTest, and we're just going to go to File. We're going to create a new test. And I'm going to save that in a separate project, not the one we were using, but into an actual project for storing test cases. Oh, actually, no, let me use our project. So I'll use our project just to show you. So Webinar Project 2. And it's a functional test case. And we'll do create new test case. And we'll call it alternate login test. Create. And now we've done that, what we can do is we can then go to manual steps. And this is a brand new test case, so it won't have any steps. And one of the things we can do is actually record this and actually build it. So what I'll do is go to record manual, and I'm going to record screenshots, but not the whole window. I do record manual. And I'm going to select the browser, hit select. And then I'm going to log in. Okay, and I've got my login and password right here. Now let me use something different. It will actually fail, so that's okay. Okay, and I'm going to log in. It's going to fail. I don't want to put everyone in. And finish. But it will have recorded what I did. So what I've got there right now is my test case pre-built for me. Now obviously it's not perfect. Some of this, like user clicks set, blah, blah, blah. That's the system name for the login button. Let's just change that. User clicks, login, set text and email address, set text. That looks pretty good. And maybe we'll just call that login. Click on login. But the nice thing is I've got my screenshots already captured. And it's already captured a starting point for the text. And now I can just hit save. That's fine. Okay. And now if I go back to Spira and refresh, there's a new test case right here. And if I click on it, you'll notice that it's actually pre-built it for me. And I mean, that's a very simple case. We just clicked on a few buttons and logged in, and that probably wouldn't take too long to document. But if this is a very complicated application with lots of clicks and the interaction, what would take 2 or 3 minutes to write as a manual test case, you can now record and build from actually using an application. And especially if you're in an agile environment where the application is changing frequently, this is a way to quickly compose test cases in a much faster way, than, especially if you want to capture screenshots with them, than having to write them out by hand. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left of the webinar time. Anything else people would like to cover, or any questions about anything you've seen?
No, it's very useful actually. There's some features that I've not seen before. Are you running an equivalent for some of the tasks and the sort of the task assignment stuff in another webinar, perhaps?
We did that previously about a month ago. It's actually on our YouTube channel, on the video section of our website. So basically on that section, we do have a webinar for using requirements tasks for planning board and that side of things.
Oh, brilliant. I'll go and check that one out as well.
Great, great. And we record all these webinars, and we do publish them. So if anyone couldn't come today, it will be published on our website under the video section, under the ideas sort of heading.
Excellent. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you. If there's no other questions, thanks everyone so much for attending. Have a great rest of the day. And the next webinar we're planning in the next week or 2 will be on load testing using SpiraTest and NeoLoad together. And that should be a popular one, as we've quite a few customers using both tools. And if there's any other ideas for webinars, please send an email to sales@intellectual.com or support@intellectual.com, and we'll happily add them to our webinar list.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.